There are moments in life when the silence between two people speaks louder than any declaration. No grand gestures, no dramatic confessions, just a quiet, steady presence. And something in your soul knows this is real. But how do you know truly? Not the kind of knowing born from fantasy, nor the kind built on ideals whispered by movies and songs. The real kind, the knowing that lives in the bones, in the stillness, in the spaces in between. Most people think love has to be loud. It has to announce itself through constant texting, perfect compatibility, the urge to be seen together, to say I love you on repeat as if the repetition alone could make it more true. But what if real love is the opposite of all that noise? What if real love is quiet, not because it's unsure, but because it's secure? Not because it's passive, but because it's deep. In a world obsessed with performance and possession, real love often goes unnoticed. It doesn't seek the spotlight. It doesn't demand attention. It simply is. And if you're not paying attention, you'll miss it. Carl Jung believed that love was not a merging of two halves, but the encounter of two whole selves. Love to him was not an escape from yourself. It was a mirror, a sacred process that reveals, challenges, and ultimately refines who you are. But it doesn't always do that through intensity. Sometimes it works through subtlety, through the quiet signs that emerge only when both people are awake, not just to each other, but to themselves. This isn't about the fireworks. This isn't about the thrill. This is about something more enduring, a force that shapes you without needing to shout, a bond that deepens in silence and grows even when words are few, a presence that asks nothing from you except that you be real. If you've ever felt that kind of love, or if you long for it, then this is for you. Let us now turn to the first silent sign. You feel seen without having to explain yourself. It begins subtly, in the way they look at you when you're not performing. When your guard is down, your words imperfect, your mood off, and still they remain, not out of obligation, not out of pity, but because they recognize something in you that doesn't need justification. In most relationships, we wear a mask. We present the parts of ourselves we think are lovable, the charm, the humor, the confidence, and we hide the rest, the fear, the doubt, the parts of us still in process. Over time, this becomes exhausting, a constant effort to be enough, to be chosen. But when real love enters, the performance fades, not because you've become someone better, but because you've finally been seen as you are, and it was enough. Jung understood this as the beginning of integration. Love to him was not about seeking approval, it was about the collapse of the false self. When someone sees not just your surface, but your essence, your contradictions, your hesitations, the quiet places in you that even you don't fully understand, it does something to the soul. It calms the nervous system. It allows rest. There's no need to rush in with explanations, no pressure to prove your worth, no fear of silence. In fact, it is in those very silences that this kind of love does its deepest work. You sit beside them and feel whole, not because they completed you, but because they never asked you to be anything else. This is not the loud assurance of someone who constantly says, I love you, but the quiet knowing in someone who shows up, who remembers what you said even when you forget, who notices when you're not yourself and doesn't force you to talk, but stays close anyway. It's easy to feel loved when you're at your best. It's another thing entirely to feel loved when you're not trying, but when you're hurting, or uncertain, or unremarkable. And still, they see you. To feel seen in this way is not about romantic drama. It's not about being rescued. It's about being met. And in that meeting, something ancient awakens, a trust you didn't know you were still missing, a space that asks nothing and gives everything. You begin to realize this is what it feels like to be real and still be loved. Not fixed, not saved, just seen. And that is the first silent sign. You are challenged but never diminished. There's a kind of love that agrees with everything you say, that avoids conflict, that nods along, that tells you you're right, even when you're not. It feels warm. It feels safe. But deep down, you know it's fragile. It's built not on honesty, but on fear. Fear of rupture, fear of rejection, fear of being too much. Real love doesn't fear the tension. Real love meets you where you are, but never lets you stay small. It holds up a mirror not just to your beauty, but to your blind spots. It calls you out, not to shame you, but to wake you. It's not cruel, it's not harsh, but it doesn't flatter you into stagnation. Carl Jung believed that relationships are alchemical vessels, crucibles where transformation takes place. And in such a space, challenge is sacred. When someone truly loves you, they are not invested in your comfort. They are invested in your becoming. And yet, here is the quiet miracle. They do it gently. They ask questions that make you think. They invite reflection without accusation. They don't use your wounds against you, nor do they weaponize their insight to gain control. Instead, they trust your capacity to rise. They believe in the strength you've forgotten, the clarity you've buried, the voice you've silenced. There's no shouting, no ultimatums, just a steady presence that holds you to a higher standard, without making you feel like a failure for not having arrived yet. You grow in their company, not because they pressure you, but because they inspire you. They see your potential even when you've lost sight of it. And you want to become more, not to please them, but because their presence reminds you of who you truly are. This is a different kind of challenge. It doesn't exhaust you, it expands you. It doesn't demand compliance, it invites evolution. And even in disagreement, there is respect. Even in confrontation, there is care. In this kind of love, growth doesn't come from fear, it comes from safety. A safety strong enough to hold the hard truths. A safety sacred enough to tell the truth in return. You do not feel less in their presence, you feel more. And that, quietly, unmistakably, is how you know you are not being controlled. You are being loved. You are given space without feeling abandoned. In the beginning, love often feels like closeness, constant contact, shared moments, intertwined days. It's natural to crave that nearness. But over time, something deeper begins to matter more. The ability to be apart without fear, to breathe on your own and still know the connection is unbroken. For many, distance triggers anxiety. Silence feels like disinterest. Solitude begins to resemble neglect. And so they chase constant reassurance, confuse attention with affection, and cling not out of love, but out of fear. But real love doesn't cling. Real love understands the value of space. It doesn't panic when things go quiet. It doesn't interpret time alone as rejection. Instead, it honors it as a necessary rhythm, like the inhale and exhale of breath. Space is not absence. It is trust made visible. Carl Jung taught that individuation, the process of becoming whole, requires solitude. No one can do your inner work for you. And so, in love, you must be allowed to leave the shared space and tend to your soul, your silence, your becoming. The person who truly loves you will not only allow that, they will encourage it. They will not chase you in your quiet moments, nor will they punish you for needing time. They will simply remain anchored, patient, respectful of your process. And when you return, nothing will feel missing. Because real connection doesn't vanish in the space between words. It deepens. This kind of love doesn't overwhelm. It breathes. It doesn't demand constant performance. It lets you rest. And most of all, it doesn't mistake nearness for intimacy. It knows that intimacy is not about how much time you spend together, but about the depth of presence when you do. You'll know it's real when you can sit in silence and still feel held. When you can spend hours apart and not feel forgotten. When you are not afraid to disappear into your own depths because you trust they'll be there when you emerge. Love that fears space is love that hasn't yet matured. But love that gives space and waits, without fear, without force, is love that has learned to trust. And trust, in its quietest form, is what makes love endure. You are accepted in your imperfection, not in spite of it, but because of it. There's a moment in every real relationship when the mask slips, when the version of you that tries to be good, attractive, composed, begins to crack. And what's underneath is something more raw, the tiredness, the past wounds, the parts of you still healing, still unfinished. In most love stories, this is the part where the fear sets in, where you wonder, will they still stay? Will they turn away when they see the parts I've hidden, even from myself? But real love, Quiet, grounded, Jungian love does not retreat, it stays. Not to fix you, not to erase the mess, but to witness it with reverence. Carl Jung believed that to truly love someone is to love the whole of them, not the edited version, not the polished surface, but the full spectrum of their being. Light and shadow, strength and struggle, presence and contradiction. Real love does not require you to be flawless. It does not ask you to be a project or a performance. It does not reduce you to your mistakes or elevate you only in your victories. It sees the uneven edges, the mood swings, the old fears that still whisper inside you, and it chooses to remain. This acceptance is not blind. It is not naive. It is conscious. It is the kind of love that says, I see where you are, and I'm not afraid of it. And because you feel that, something opens inside you. You no longer need to hide. You no longer need to apologize for being human. You soften. You begin to offer your full self, not in fear, but in trust. There's a sacred stillness in being accepted like this. Not praised for your perfection, but held in your humanity. Not applauded for always being strong, but loved when you're vulnerable, unsure, and real. And here's the quiet truth Jung pointed to. We do not become whole by rejecting the flawed parts of ourselves. We become whole when someone sees them, honors them, and helps us integrate them. In this kind of love, the goal is not to be ideal. The goal is to be real. And from that realness, from that quiet, radical acceptance, true intimacy is born. You are not asked to change to be loved. You are loved, and so you begin to change. Not because you must, but because now, finally, it feels safe to grow. You grow without losing yourself. Some relationships make you feel like you have to shrink, to fit, to please, to keep the peace. You start saying less, dreaming smaller, doubting your instincts. Little by little, the edges of who you are begin to dull. And though you may be loved, you no longer feel free. But real love doesn't ask you to disappear. Carl Jung taught that the journey of becoming individuation doesn't pause when you enter a relationship. If anything, it begins anew. The right connection doesn't dissolve your identity, it deepens it. The person beside you doesn't become your purpose. They become a companion on the path. Someone who honors your becoming, not as a threat, but as a blessing. In this kind of love, your growth is not feared, it's welcomed. You change, and they don't try to pull you back. You evolve, and they don't ask, why can't you be who you were? They watch as you step into new versions of yourself. And instead of resisting, they walk beside you. There is no jealousy of your independence, no punishment for your ambition, no guilt tripping when your soul asks for solitude or stretch. There is only encouragement, quiet, unwavering, and the deep security that comes from knowing you are not being loved for staying the same. You are being loved as you grow. This love doesn't compete with your potential. It supports it. It doesn't measure your worth by how predictable you are, but by how fully you dare to live. And you don't lose yourself in the bond. You find more of yourself because of it. You write again. You take risks. You say what you mean. You remember who you were before fear made you small. And you begin to trust that becoming more doesn't mean being loved less. That's the quiet strength of real love. It doesn't tether you to the past. It invites you into the future. A future where love is not a cage, but a current, lifting, carrying, expanding everything it touches. You do not have to choose between love and selfhood. In the right relationship, they are the same path. You find peace in their presence. Not excitement, not escape, but peace. The world often confuses drama with depth. We're told that love should be intense, wild, consuming. That if it doesn't keep you up at night, it's not real. And so we chase the highs, the butterflies, the chaos disguised as passion. But Carl Jung knew better. He understood that what the soul longs for is not adrenaline. It is stillness. In true love, there's a quiet peace that settles between two people. Not because everything is perfect, but because nothing has to be. You're not performing, you're not impressing, you're simply being. And somehow, that is enough. You might sit in silence and feel more connected than in hours of conversation. You might share a simple meal, a walk, a moment at the end of a long day, and in that moment, everything feels right. Not in a dramatic, cinematic way, but in a way that's soft, grounded, and lasting. This peace is not the absence of emotion, it's the presence of something deeper: trust, safety, presence. It's knowing you can show up tired, broken, uncertain, and still be welcomed. It's knowing you don't have to keep the energy high to hold their attention. You don't have to be entertaining, you just have to be real. Jung saw this kind of love as a spiritual connection, something rooted not just in the body or the mind, but in the soul, a resonance, a recognition, not of perfection, but of alignment. When you're with this person, your nervous system relaxes, your guard drops, you breathe easier. Not because nothing could go wrong, but because you've stopped waiting for it to. This is the love that doesn't feel like a storm. It feels like a home. It may not look impressive from the outside. It may not come with grand gestures or sweeping declarations, but it's the kind of love that endures, the kind that rebuilds you slowly, the kind that teaches you that peace is not boring, it is sacred. And when you find it, you realize just how rare it is to be with someone and finally feel at rest. No more tension, no more pretending, just the deep, quiet knowing I'm safe here. That is the sixth silent sign. Not the rush of falling, but the calm of staying. You are mirrored, not managed. The final silent sign of real love is this: they do not try to change you, they reflect you. In so many relationships, love becomes a quiet manipulation, a series of gentle corrections, subtle reshaping, the unspoken message that you'd be easier to love if only you were different. And so you begin to adjust, not out of growth, but out of fear. You abandon your quirks, your rhythms, your instincts. You start managing their perception of you. You start becoming someone you're not. But in true love, there is no pressure to conform. There is only clarity. Carl Jung believed that relationships are mirrors, not tools of control. The person you love is not your project. They are your reflection. And when two people love each other deeply, they do not mold one another into something easier. They witness what is, and through that witnessing, growth happens naturally. You don't feel corrected, you feel revealed. The right person won't interrupt your healing. They'll hold space for it. They won't demand you be further along. They'll meet you where you are. They won't shut down your fire or your softness, your silence or your storm. They will reflect it, not to control it, but to understand it, and you will do the same for them. This kind of mirroring doesn't always feel comfortable. It brings you face to face with parts of yourself you've tried to ignore. It shows you your patterns, your projections, your pain, but it does so in a way that invites honesty, not shame. Instead of, you need to be different, it becomes, I see what's rising in you, let's look at it together. Instead of walking on eggshells, you begin walking in awareness. You communicate, you hold each other gently, even when it's hard. And in those moments of friction, something sacred emerges. Not blame, not distance, but depth. Because this love isn't about fixing the other. It's about facing yourself. And through that process, through being mirrored without being managed, you evolve. You shed the false selves. You reclaim what you once exiled. You become more you. Not because someone told you to, but because in their presence, you remembered how. That is the seventh silent sign. Not the pressure to change, but the sacred space to return. Love, when it's real, doesn't scream for attention. It doesn't parade itself through constant declarations or dramatic proofs. It whispers, it listens, it stays. And it transforms you, not with force, but with quiet truth. You've now walked through 7 silent signs. Not of fairy tale romance, not of fantasy or perfection, but of something deeper, the kind of love that grows in stillness, that reflects your soul, that invites you to rise. A love that sees you even when you can't explain yourself. A love that challenges you without making you feel small. A love that gives you space, not to distance, but to breathe. A love that accepts your flaws as part of your beauty. A love that lets you grow without fear of being left behind. A love that brings peace, not boredom, but grounding. And a love that mirrors you, not to fix, but to reveal. These are not the signs people post about. They're not flashy. They don't always look impressive from the outside, but they are the signs that matter. the ones that last, the ones your soul recognizes, even if your mind takes time to catch up. Carl Jung taught that love is not a merging, it's a meeting. The contact of two whole selves, each walking their own path, choosing, again and again, to walk together. Not out of need, not out of fear, but out of presence, out of truth. And so if you're looking for love, or if you're already in it, ask yourself, does it make you quieter inside or louder? Does it bring you closer to who you are or further away? Does it feel like pressure or does it feel like peace? The answers won't always shout, but they will speak if you listen. And when you find that kind of love, silent, steady, sacred, hold it not with fear, but with reverence. Not to own it, but to honor it. Because love, when it is real, does not complete you. It reminds you you were already whole.